a nice talk with Ulf Träger, who is here today to talk about space making and space shaping. Like I said, maps are a huge part of our reality today. We use maps a lot, and they change the way we see the world, and maybe they also change our perspective on a lot of other things. And so today we have a talk here, and Ulf Träger, whom I'm welcoming very, very warm today. He will give you some more insights about what's possible and what we can do with maps. So give him a warm applause. Welcome, Ulf.
Thank you for the announcement and the invitation. I will talk in German. There is a live translation in English.
There will be a live translation into English. So please, if you need this, call the stack number or seek help with the angels. I want to talk about maps.
I want to talk about maps. I want to talk about digital maps in the next half hour. I will also explain that maps and their digitalization are getting more and more important for our worldview. And I want to show you some examples of the pre-digitalized age to show you that maps are not value neutral. They always have a worldview behind them, and they are always have been created with a certain intention behind them. And I also want to show you how maps, what an impression maps have on us today. I will show you 3 examples how map technologies, digital map technologies today have been developed, how further development will happen, what the political meaning of this development. I already said that cards are never value neutral. They always have a social and political background. And I want to explain a constructive handling of this background, political background. I also want to show you alternative cards that have another viewpoint, another political viewpoint behind them. And I also want to show you that the view on a card will also be... I will start with a very old card because it's interesting, the form, how it presents space. This is a card which was used for hundreds of years. This is called a wheel card because of the round form. The interesting thing about this card is its metaphysical information, feelings, myths, monsters, dragons, next to rational things like space, rivers, and this connects these 2 things. And since this was a Christian map, the point in the middle is Jerusalem. And the exact position is not important, it's just an overview of the world. These cards existed for a long time, but at some point they lost their use. There was a much more demand of cards that are actually usable for navigation, like cards we have today. And the main pressure that for these cards to exist was sea, traveling by boat, because they want to have exact cards for exact navigation. And someone who did this successfully was Mercator. He did good projection of the world ball on an area.
Up today is the main map. We use it nowadays, natural maps. Very later, like in the 70s, the 20th century, there was the first criticism on these maps and this type of maps, this projection of those maps, and this criticism was this projection of these maps for navigation. It works. The term of use is it's conformal. You can start somewhere and you get up in your end where you want to be. It works very fine. But it is completely wrong if you look at the land itself. If you have a short explanation, for example, in north and south, the land are way too big, but around the equator, where it's here in the middle, you can see, I'll show it here, especially in the south continents, it's just the lands are too small. You see that very well at Greenland. If you look at top, it's about the same size as Africa, but in fact, it's just about 1/12 as big as Africa. And the criticism was, you just get used to this, you think it's true, but in fact it is wrong, because the equilibrium is not true, and it favors this wrong image you get, because it's an European image of the world we have, and here in Europe, it's very we have a very small country compared to other ones, and so in this grotesque bigger thing, and we take this into account and accept this wrong image of reality. This led not to the fact that we have new maps, because the navigation was the main point, and this works, but it opened the space we have to understand there are other maps. So maps are never neutral, and mistakes in maps are often based on idealism, and they're accepted on this base. Another important point in the history of maps is a conference held in 1884. It was held in New York. It's called the International Meridian Conference. This conference is very important because, meanwhile, there were very important tools for navigation, especially on sea, but still, there was still a lot of confusement in the coordination system, and especially in time zones. Every bigger unit had their own coordination system, such as Denmark had the ruling about Altona, town of Hamburg, and they had their own coordination system, and they had their own time system. So if you take the train through North America, you had like 35 local times. So every time you get out of the train, you had to orientate yourself in this new time zone, and you had to ask people, what is the local time now? So to get rid of this confusion and to get a solution for this, there was this conference. We wanted to find a solution to unify everything. So, for example, transport of people gets easier. So the most important imperium, the great UK, you know, everyone here knows 0 Meridian goes through UK, it goes through Greenwich, suburb of London, which is also time for synchronization of time. And what you see is that there are all these different aspects of time are just get together, and space and area was taken into one whole thing. And we wanted to have a global system of coordinates, which was very important for the further development. And one example which shows how important this is, this standardizing, was not a conference. It was held shortly after. It was held a conference in Berlin. It's called the Congo Conference, 1884 to 1885. It was a very long conference, taking over 4 months. There were many rich people sitting together and discussing like countries such as Germany or UK or Spain were sitting there, and they were discussing all these issues, especially about Africa. You can see it here on the map, how you can deal with it. The point was, there are parts of Africa which are, from a Western point of view, are not colonized yet. They're not known yet, so we haven't done anything about it. And basically, they wanted to see how they can split it among them. But this only works if you can define territory. You have to have the maps and the standards that everyone is talking about the same thing. So we have to take into account all the interests, we can take all the boundaries, also talking about military who's defending which point. So it was a very interesting point and was close to the Meriden Conference. And this example shows that how these maps are also important for colonism, that we can defend the areas we've already gathered, and they can show their interests. So in the colonism was, of course, so these maps were also important for the power of the cities. Another example, which chronological does not really is set, but which is also important. It's a aerial photography,
which was important for aerial making pictures out of planes, because it simplifies cartography immensely. One was able to fly over an area and then photographically categorize it. And this is much easier than sending people on ground and measuring distances. So you can just make area pictures out of planes and then at home measure the distances on the pictures. And so that means that our maps became a lot more precise. So this was made in the First World War, 1916. The First World War. In the First World War, the plane photography was everybody used it, but after the First World War, everybody did the measurements on the maps, and then this information went through society, and everybody was able to access the more precise maps. And so one example is this: an architect in the 20th century. He used the aerial photography. So this, he used the aerial photographs to look at urban structures, to look at cities, and he used it to form structures and city planning from an aesthetic point of view. So he used the aerial photography to make aesthetic city planning. And of course, it was afterwards criticized that somebody does this structuring from above, not taking into account the view of the individual living in the city. What is also some other areas that aerial photography had influences on was somebody used aerial photography to show social problems in cities. He showed that typical structures of poor areas in cities you can see from aerial photography, because, for example, the buildings are very close together, and his results were discussed because he used the objective cartography to get results about poverty. And I'm sorry.
Many scientists criticize this type. For example, there are some who would say that aerial photography is just a surveillance. They refuse to accept this because the perspective on the ground, the perspective from the individuals living in the cities is way more important than this point of view from on top. And also other people having a very huge debate and discussing this new technology and discussing where it's going. What mustn't be forgot, we always have to recall, these maps were very detailed, very sharp, and the pictures, of course, they were. But still, it's still a representation. It's just a representation of the reality. They're just get more complex and technology more advanced, so they seem to be more natural, but still it's just representation. And this point is something that gets shaped. So one example you all know from the global positioning system, GPS in the 80s. I think it's what, 89, 90, something like that. It was also open for private usage. So there's also a Russian system today. The European Union is working on our system, but this form of a global positioning system brought one new fact in cartography: the automatic, relatively precisely representation of your own position on a map. And this made possible what you know, already said it, it's a navigation system which lets you through the city, which tells you exactly your own position in the city. There are happening other things due to this global positioning system, GPS, and through this forms of this navigation system. First of all, the map changes. Maps used to be a big picture of a orientation system. Even though you only used it for navigation from A to B, you always had the context. So you could read the map, you could collect all the information on your way, so you could see the whole picture. This has changed. The focus is much more narrow, it's much smaller. We only see navigation screen, we don't see the context anymore. We don't read it anymore, we just look at the map somehow. We get additional information if you want to or not. So they're moderated from someone else has put them together. We don't have to take care of this. And that's the one very, very important change in this navigation form. Of course, the perspective is also something which changed. You don't have this like perspective from on top to bottom, but now you have this ego shooter perspective. When you are on the ground, when you walk on the ground. And another important point, which in this is shown here, it used to be that maps were always being made prior. So the usage of the map was always afterwards the generation of the map. But now using the GPS system, when you're mobile, in your navigation system, they're always recording. Sometimes you don't want to have this, sometimes you don't want to. For example, through software or surveillance, whatever. But whatever you do, wherever you go, it's recorded. So the creation and the usage of the map is happening at the exact same moment. So you can't take this apart. So the maps are always modified during my movement, and there are new levels of information because I move through the space or the area. So that's a very interesting point, because there are different points of view how we can use the area around us. But your knowledge about how a person moves through the space, how he or she is using the map, is very happening at the same moment as you're creating the map. And this brings me to the next point. When you look into the future, or when you look at the moment, what's happening right now? What is interesting at the moment? Which makes cartography, which makes it changing? Which will give it more other powerful tools? So we can use in politics, in social points, or in cultural areas. I would like to show 3 aspects. The first aspect is satellite photography, which is kind of something similar as aerial photography. So we go into a new satellite photography.
In the public space, 1994, 1995, some people know this better, but in the moment, there are about 100, 120 satellites produced, and most of them are deployed, or they will be deployed next year. They're very small. They're as small as a refrigerator, and they're produced by small companies. But they will improve the quality of the pictures drastically. So this, for example, is a satellite picture from 2012, which has a very good resolution. It doesn't have the top-down perspective. It has a slightly asymmetric view. And of course, the second thing is the mass, the raw number of satellites. You will get a lot more pictures. So at the moment, it is normal that a random place in the world will be visited every few days. And soon we will have the situation that every single location in the world will be visited like every day up to 10 times. And so, of course, this is also troubling because of surveillance aspects. And also it's interesting of every commercial usage of maps. The second thing is, and there's not a lot of information about this, like in other parts of digitalization, you can build algorithms that replace humans. And in this case, it's about, well, machine learning, self-learning algorithms that learn to cartography. And for example, this nice picture was produced in February 2016 by Facebook. And they announced that they use such a mechanism. They want to use the population density, and they want to measure it worldwide. And they use satellites for that. So it's not very sophisticated technology. This technology just uses the photographs of satellites to count buildings, and then estimates how many humans live in every building. So it's not very sophisticated, but this is already troubling that you can do something like this. And the photography on the one side, but this other example I will show now is real-time data flows that are produced all the time. And together with photography, you can do a lot of data analysis. So, for example, this real-time data flow is from traffic data flows. So industry has a strong interest in this, being active in this, collecting the data, and do something with data. So one is the auto industry, the car industry. There is also other interests, platform economics, Uber. Also, the state has interest in this. So in different on different levels, there are different companies and interest groups collect this data. So, for example, this is city data. This is very concrete. This is a project from Hamburg, this smart city project. This is a screenshot from the supervision monitor in the Hamburg harbor. This shows how the trucks are supervised in real time and are and it shows how the trucks are going through the city in real time. And this shows how something we something we know from every day can be represented as data. And this massive use of digital technology and cartography can help you to keep alive systems that already exist and to improve them. So another important point, if you look at the cartography and machine learning and big data in city space, there will be different kinds of maps.
It has been ages as government has made the maps, but now it's changing for private operators, such as Alphabet or smaller companies as Uber. They're using higher precise maps, and they're also taking into account the movement data which is in these maps and what's happening. There are maps as we can look at them as users or as drivers, but we don't see what Uber sees. So there are more classes of cartography. So this is a screenshot how Uber sees the maps. So in the command center in San Francisco, this information is written down here in this map. As a normal person, you can't see this map. And that's something which is going to be happening more and more, that there are different filters of maps and what you see in the city, the access to the maps. And the second aspect, and I have to hurry up a little bit, the second very important effect which is happening is what you can see in this example. It's our cultural hypes such as Pokemon Go, as these factors, satellite photography, algorithms, and map construction, and the third one, the big data flow. If they come together, people get a complete new geography from the city. They're led through the city. For example, you see here one of these Pokemon Go meetings in San Francisco, Fisherman's Frogs, where completely new ways and new patterns of movement in the city occurred because from this melange of these three factors. There was a general overview of these tendencies. Maybe in Q&A we can discuss a little later or after the talk. I just wanted to show some ideas, and was just as important, was always said in the beginning. So next to these functional maps, for example, for irrigation, it's as important that you make cards which show different views on the world, a different point of view from the city. So I think it's very important that those maps are opening a new space and show what's possible. So they give you a new point of view, what we in the space is more than the structure. So one example that's a little bit older, I really like it. It's from an institute from 2001. It's a Flash application. It shows a very nice tool. That's New York. You see these red squares. There are surveillance cameras. And the tool allows you to set your one position and the destination you want to go. And it shows you the way you have to go, that you have the least cameras on your way. So it's a very nice example for a tactical tool. Of course, it also has a message. So this Institute for Applied Autonomy have made similar things. They said it's a tool we've made, but also it's a criticism on this society of surveillance, and we want to show how you can access room, for example. Another example, we are more into storytelling, which is also important, or is as important. It's not a project from the US. It's called Anti-Eviction Mapping Project. It's throughout San Francisco. In San Francisco, we have a problem. For over 30 years, you have a gentrification. So the people who have been living there are made to move there, and new people are coming. And this project has the task, they want to document this process of gentrification. For example, how people have to leave their flats, and what they do not only look at numbers, which are displayed in maps, but they also want to give information from the people who have been living there. So this map is kind of a tool to get access to the stories of these people. It's not as an archive, as a museum, it's just a living construct somehow. And so you can really see what's happening there, and that you have to be active, because there's always a human being which is a victim of this. This one is an example from this project, how this map is projected into the city. And it's a last project I want to show you. It's from Munich. I already showed you the Congo conference about colonialism. Germany was also part of colonialism, was very active in this part. So in all the bigger cities in Germany, you have traces of colonialism, and in most of them, you have also people who are documenting this tracing, not only from historical reasons, but more of we want to have to talk about, to discuss this. And the nice thing about this project over here, they took a real map with real coordinates, but the thing we usually know, like streets and other systems, they took the systems, they took their information and put their information in there, and their information and the shape of their storytelling is made through this. I think it's a very important project because it completely breaks off the image you have from maps. And as a last point, I have 30 seconds left. I want to show you some other things. So digital cartography is very important. It's very easy to use. The technologies are very easy to use. And just to say something, there is OpenStreetMap with open data. So you can make cards, maps. There's also free software which helps you doing so. So GKI systems. It makes sense to make your own maps and maybe to get rid of these classical car maps and draw your own base layers. And as I showed in these three images, there are very different aspects you can take into this. So you can take the whole context of these maps and show the social relevance. Very important, if there are no open geodata, please collect them and share it. OpenStreetMap is one of these projects. It's a very good basement for this map data. And this also has the aim
so that we can influence the maps, and we are not only influenced by the maps, we have to think about the future narrative of the maps. Thank you.
Okay. Vielen Dank, Ulf. Das war super.
Okay, thank you, Ulf. That was awesome. Are there any questions about this topic? We have a little bit of time, 1 or 2 questions we can answer if somebody wants to ask something. Hello, thank you for the lecture. I have a few comments. Cards at the same time producing cards and using cards. He does not think that this. So already in the 7th century. Okay, it was just a comment, not a question. Do we have a question? Okay, this is it. There will not be no more questions. We don't have time. Thank you.